Welcome to the A2 Show with Andrew Cass and Aaron Parkinson, bringing you the trends and topics that affect our lives the most: business, politics, fitness, family, and finance. With over 50 plus years of combined business experience and over $1 billion in revenue generated, your hosts have a unique gift for seeing many steps ahead where others do not. They bring their unfiltered, contrarian views to the show every week to help you win in business and in life.
Aaron, the time has come where we need to unpack one of the bigger elections we've seen in our lifetime. I think at least one of the most controversial, one of the most anticipated, certainly one of the most volatile. And the numbers are in. As of the time of this recording, we are almost 2 weeks out from the actual election, and it was an absolute romping. We were jokingly talking about this the other day. I don't think I've ever seen a time where there was a 100-point electoral difference. That was huge. And a 5 million, I'm looking at the numbers right now, I'll bring it up, and a 5 million vote difference in the popular vote. And then on top of that, a Senate and Congress sweep by the Republicans, which means in those four categories, it was a clean red wave sweep. It was really unbelievable. Now, the goal of the show today isn't to talk about who's better than who or, who did what wrong, although we'll talk about that from a business perspective today. The goal today is to talk about how did it happen? How did somebody who raised $1 billion in cash lose so big? And how does somebody who has lawsuits thrown at him every other day, it felt like for 3 years, win so big in the mind of the people? And there's a lot going on here psychologically, marketing, message-wise, branding-wise, positioning-wise, that I think you're going to take away some great lessons on how to run a promotion and how to run your messaging, because most of our viewers are business owners. So I think for the most part, what you'll get here is A, some psychology on why it happened. I think it is fascinating. And number two, what could it mean to your marketing, your promotion, and your messaging as a business owner moving forward? So here we go.
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting elections that I've ever seen. And it's important, I think, to remind our viewers and our listeners, I'm Canadian. I don't live in America. I live in the Cayman Islands, which is a country that has no taxes of any type and operates quite differently than the rest of the world. And so I don't really get involved in a lot of following of politics because I kind of feel like it can be a distraction and I need to be focused and control what I can control. But this reminded me of the banking meltdown in 2008, where in both instances, when I watched the election and when the election was finished, in both of those cases, I felt a huge sense of relief when it was over. When Obama was elected in, I felt like this looks like an adult. They have everything under control. They're going to go in and solve this issue that's been created by the bankers. And I felt very relieved when that happened. And I felt the same sense of relief this time when it happened, because I felt like the country was definitely had been put on the wrong track for the last 4 years. It didn't really have much to do with the fact that Trump was leading the party. If anything, I think almost anybody else in that position would have won.
The landslide would have remained the same.
I think the landslide would have remained the same based on how the campaign was run.
Exactly.
I don't actually think it had anything to do with Trump. I think if anything, Trump probably made it even less of a landslide of what it could have been.
I completely agree. A matter of fact, I'm going to bring this up, Aaron. It's a good point that you make. It's an interesting point you make from an outsider as well. But check out this chart right here. Let me see if we can write. Here it is. So this is the final numbers. 312 Trump, 226 Harris, 74,648 popular, 79,115 popular, almost a 100-point landslide. Aaron, let me tell you something. I'm going to throw two names out here, and I'm going to come back on here. If Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis were the Republican nominees, they were the two closest to winning in the primaries. I'm telling you right now that it would not have been 312 to 226. It would have been something like 380 to 180.
I
Trump,
can see that being a reality.
yeah, and here's the thing, because Trump carried the legal baggage and all the stuff with him, and he obviously has challenges communicating. You and I have been very critical of Trump over the years with his communication style. We've generally liked the communication style better of somebody like a Ron DeSantis or a Nikki Haley or a Vivek Ramaswamy, right? These are really, really good up and coming people.
RFK.
Well, RFK for sure, but he's not a Republican at this time.
Right.
Well, he's almost there now, right? He's kind of there now. But for sure, we were RFK guys all the way. So naturally, when he joined the Trump team, A, we were surprised, and B, we were now suddenly supporters of RFK. I firmly believe, and we'll talk about it in the show, that RFK's presence on that ticket was probably responsible. My estimate is about 10 million votes, which absolutely swayed the election. The Elon Musk factor on top, also a former Democrat who got involved, not because he loves Trump, but because he saw the Marxist socialist agenda train moving forward, also had a major impact, specifically because he has a huge platform owning Twitter, right? But let's unpack that for 1 minute, though, because I know that the left likes to go, oh, it wasn't fair because Elon Musk has his own platform and that's not fair. He can get in front of 1 billion people in no time. Let's be clear. In 2020, Mark Zuckerberg was one of the largest funders and promoters of Joe Biden. He censored his platform. He's now admitted it. He removed conservative viewpoints, and he funded that administration to the tune of $500 billion as a Facebook social media platform owner, and Facebook is by far the biggest. So we could call it people like to call it election interference, but it really isn't. It's just billionaires deciding they want to get behind and promote a candidate, which couldn't be more American. They have every right to do that. It doesn't matter if they own a social media platform, if they own a car company, if they own Tesla, if they own whatever you want to call it. That's how democracy works. You can get behind anybody you want to get behind.
I also don't think you can overlook the Joe Rogan effect, if I'm being honest.
No question about it. It was late, Aaron. It was really the only thing I would say about that is, yes, I'm with you, but it was really late. It was like a week out.
Yeah, but sometimes when you come into the 12th round with a fresh fighter,
good analogy.
It makes a big difference, right?
Or like I say, 2 outs in the 9th inning, and you're bringing your 105 mile an hour high heat fastball guy in to finish it off, right?
And he's really built his podcast and his reputation on being very down the middle.
Oh yeah,
putting the hard questions at people and calling them out on their nonsense. So he's really built this following of when he takes a stance on something, people believe that it's that he hasn't been manipulated or he hasn't been bought. And when he said, hey, Trump, do you want to come on? And Trump came on and he said to Harris, do you want to come on? And she said, no, I don't want to come there. You have to come to me and you only get 2 hours and it has to be
No. 45 minutes, buddy.
Whatever craziness it was.
That's a difference.
They kind of shot themselves in the foot there.
Oh, no doubt about it.
And then eventually he came out and he said, just in case you want to know, yes, my vote is for Republican. So not only did he interview, he came out, which he rarely does, and says, I want to be very clear here. Yes, this is an endorsement of this party.
I caught that.
Because he'd had enough of what he had seen. Very, very similar to Bill Ackman.
That's right.
Very similar to RFK, who didn't even really want to partner with Trump. He was
correct.
He was very clear about that, but he felt like if he didn't, the negative outcome was too large for him to stomach at a conscious level.
Absolutely.
So it was very interesting that all of these mega powers effectively aligned and said, we're not playing this game anymore. And it really landslide crushed. And I would say probably in spite of some very odd things. And again, keep in mind, I'm not American, but I've had a lot of conversations with people saying, people being able to vote without ID is insanity. There's no good reason for people to be able to vote without ID. No country lets you vote without ID. This is standard practice.
It was astounding to watch.
It was astounding, right? And if you look at some of these elements, mail-in votes, no ID voting, people caught making mistakes at voting centers. I think it was a landslide in spite of some tomfoolery. that was going on.
I'm going to bring this up again to your point about the no voter ID, because I know people can go, oh yeah, that was just a rumor. No, it actually wasn't. So see these blue states, Aaron? I mean, this is a red wave if I've ever seen a red wave. So, and traditionally these are the blue states that always tend to be blue, right? Top, far left, top right. Right? New England, New York area, metro area, California, Oregon, Washington. You want to hear something funny? Now, I don't have the exact stats on this, but I have most of the stats on this. Out of all of those blue states, there might be 14 or 15 right there. I believe somewhere between 9 and 12 of those blue states were passing laws that would not require voter ID. This is fact now. Now, California is a fact. California passed a law. I kid you not. Make sure you're sitting down. California passed a law, Aaron, that says they are not allowed to ask for ID at the 2024 presidential election because it would be racist and discriminatory. There were videos of people showing their ID, and the people working at the polls go, no, new laws in California, we're not allowed to see it. We can't ask for that. It's discrimination. We're not allowed to see it. The guy running California, Gavin Newsom, is the most radical, far-left, toxic, Marxist communist that has ever entered politics in American history. He is no different than the people who run North Korea, China, Cuba, or Trudeau, who's all the way down the path of communism, in my view, in Canada. He is no different. He is the most dangerous man that has ever put on a suit and been a politician in America, just on that alone. But that's only one of about 9 things he's done over the last couple of years. That's pretty radical.
The sad thing about that is that there are definitely laws that I think have been put in place to offset racism and things like that. And I think many of those laws are probably very good, and they were probably overdue. To hide behind that in what looks like an obvious attempt to steal votes.
Oh God, yeah.
Makes people very uneasy. And
I think it pisses them off too, to your point earlier. People got pissed off in this time around. They weren't like, Trump's our guy, he's the best, he can fix it. They were like, stop constantly cheating and doing identity politics and making everyone a racist and all this woke ideology and this tribalism. Like, none of this is politics. Your party isn't even a political party anymore. You're like a cult at this point. It's incredible.
Well, and there's a quote that I can't remember where I heard it the first time, but the very first time I heard it, I loved it. It might have actually been from the movie Rounders. Did you ever see the movie Rounders?
I think I might have.
Rounders was about professional poker players, and it actually.
Oh, I don't know, but yeah.
It actually turned me on to being a professional poker player, and that's why I ended up playing poker for a living for a year. And I remember
those stories, yeah.
And it's about when people cheat. So if you play in these backroom games, because a lot of the countries or the states, like, gambling's illegal, right? So there's a lot of backroom poker games, and I played in a lot of those backroom poker games, and you've got such a wide array of personalities in these games. And there's a lot of cheating that happens. They call them mechanics, where people will be dealing, but they'll be dealing off the bottom of the deck, or they'll be shuffling and setting you up. And if you don't catch it, you can be taken for a ride. And it was about this one scene in this movie where this guy's cheating all the time and taking money from people. And the guy said to him, you can shear a sheep many times, but you can skin them only once. And that quote stays in my head. And I feel like the American populace had been sheared many times. And at this point, they felt like they were going to be skinned. And they were tired of the media censorship. They were tired of the media corruption. They were tired of learning after the fact about all the science around vaccines or lack of science around vaccines. They were tired of the nonsense reporting around inflation. They were tired of the talking nonsense around wars and nothing, being handled, and money being sent all over the place. And they were at that tipping point where they felt like democracy as they knew it was slipping out of their hands.
Absolutely spot on. And that's interesting coming from somebody who's way on the outside. I think here in America, when you hear guys like Musk and Bill Ackman and Robert F. Kennedy and Michael Schellenberger of Public and Tulsi Gabbard, these are people, Joe Rogan, they're all lifelong Democrats, liberals. Every single one of them will tell you I was a lifelong liberal Democrat, Republican Party in years past, like around the Bush days. And I don't think as much Reagan days. It was more Bush and Bush, where they got a little bit more of the elitist party, where they were in bed with corporations and they were the war party. That has completely flipped. And every one of them that left the party says that. You don't have to take my word for it or Aaron's word for it. These are people who've left the party. They have no incentive for doing so, and they're actually sharing exactly how there's been a realignment and how the parties have essentially flipped. Now, I estimate that approximately 30% of the population, their cognitive dissonance is so fierce that even as we say that, and even as it's been proven by people who've been in the party, wrote books, done documentaries, and said all this, and actually joined the other party, they actually still believe it isn't happening as it's happening in front of their eyes. That's concerning to me. It's almost like they're in a trance of some sort, that they can't see what you just mentioned. And it's important what you just mentioned, because there's that same chunk of people are a chunk of people who think that people voted for Trump as if they were voting for a spouse or a roommate. You voted for a guy who was accused of rape. You voted for a guy who tried to overthrow an election. Yeah, that stuff happened for sure. He was accused, not convicted of a lot of it, by the way. So there's always, truth is somewhere in the middle. But again, you're not voting for a best buddy. You're voting, and Chris Cuomo put this best, and Chris Cuomo's another former Democrat, CNN guy for years. He was part of the Democrat cabal for years. I'll never forget the statement he made last week. He said, if you think people voted for Trump because they like Trump or they're like Trump, you are absolutely wrong. They hired Trump to do a dirty job, and a dirty job it is. That's all they did. And he's right.
That's an interesting way to put it. And I think it would be interesting to look at the marketing fundamentals.
We will in a minute. Yep, we will.
Of this, because you have to remember that marketing and marketers play a massive role in who's going to win. There's no question. And when you look at the breakdown, at least the breakdowns I've seen online of funding, it seems like the majority of the money raised by the Republicans went to
promotion, marketing,
travel, rallies, promotions, all fall under the same bucket of marketing.
Agreed.
And a very large portion of the Democrat budget went to entertainers, consultants, outside entities that said they could help. And unfortunately, from the outside looking in, it kind of looks like they got fleeced a little bit.
It also looks like they fleeced the people a little bit too. We'll start with the funding. So the Harris administration raised $1 billion in 90 days.
I thought it was more than that.
I think it was $1.3 billion, let's call it, right? Here's the numbers as of today. There's something like $1.5 billion there's something like $1.5 billion spent, but they only had $1.3 billion. Last I checked, they're short about $100 to $200 million. I'm not sure of those numbers.
Which is wild.
Now, what we also found out here is that all of those I shouldn't say all, but most of those entertainers and actors that you saw come in at the end with these 2 outs in the 9th inning promotions, it was like, did you notice that, Aaron? It was like, where were these people 2 months ago? We're 2 weeks out. It was everybody you could think of, from J-Lo to Beyonce to Eminem. It was everybody you can think of. Guess what? To my knowledge, and this is independent bipartisan reporting, because the super PAC money is public information. When you have PAC money, it's almost like you have a publicly traded company. It has to be transparent. Now, that administration probably will do everything in their power not to make it transparent, because they don't even know the meaning of the word. But $1 million or $100 million or $200 million overspent, most of these entertainers got paid from that $1 billion to endorse. Now, I couldn't think of anything more ingenuine and more inauthentic than me being Beyonce coming to Houston. By the way, they told Houston, 30,000 people in an arena, that Beyonce was performing. That is fact. She was not performing. So they got 30,000 people in an arena so that they could create the pictures of all these people who were supporters. That was a psyop. Secondly, she came and gave a 4-minute speech, and when she got off stage, the place booed because they were waiting for her to perform. That entire charade was covered up. That is fact. It was covered up by mainstream media. So they created this bait and switch perception that there was 30,000 people in an arena. There probably would have been 3 if it wasn't for Beyonce, right? They wanted to see performance, and they wanted to see Kamala too, probably. But at the end of the day, they wanted to be entertained, not dictated to, that Donald Trump is some dictator, right? That's what they did. This was what they did. This is when I knew they were going to lose huge, is when they were lying, bait and switching with the money and throwing mulligans with entertainers with 2 outs in the 9th inning. That is so unethical. Say what you want about Trump. Say what you want about Harris. That is a campaign that I don't care who you are. If you run your campaign that way, where you abuse money, abuse entertainers, abuse the intelligence of the American people, and play bait and switch games with your rallies, you are a total fraud.
Well, and there's a couple of different elements that I noticed because I was watching it with my kids, and I always take things from a middle of the road standpoint and say, okay, look at both sides of this equation. And I was saying, watch how the media is all using the same terms for things.
Yeah,
so
the lock, step, and barrel language, right?
Yeah, there was some terms that became repetitive in the media. Terms like fascist.
Yep.
Fascist became a term that was used over and over again. Another one that we saw pop up all the time was the term hate rally to describe his event that he had in New York.
By the way, to describe patriotism, to describe unity, to describe people coming together.
Like, it doesn't even matter to me whether you think that thing was patriotic or any of those things. It certainly wasn't a hate rally. It was them holding an event.
I know.
But you could see the words being repeated over and over again to embed themselves subconsciously, which, by the way, is actually a really good marketing tactic.
If it's done ethically.
Well, it's a good marketing tactic. I'm not saying it's ethical. I'm saying it's a good marketing tactic.
Yeah, it's highly manipulative, and persuasion, as we know, can be used for good or bad.
Right. And there was even weird things like on my phone, for example, I opened Facebook, and I don't know if I told you this, but I punched in Robert F. in the search bar.
No Kennedy?
No Kennedy. I just put in Robert F. And he was the 10th person to show up on the listings.
On Google? On
Facebook.
On Facebook. Yeah, they suppressed the search.
Right. And whether they did or they didn't, when you see stuff like that, you go, this just doesn't make any sense. And I think all of the combination and the culmination of the stuff that was communicated and suppressed around COVID, the stuff that was being thrown around during the elections, the terms that were being repeated over and over again, obviously a very poor economy, obviously wars happening all over the place.
Let's not forget the open border.
The open border was, I think, a huge issue for a lot of people. Even the like no ID voting, like even the most staunch Democrat looks at that and goes, okay, hold on, that's
you just crossed the line. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of places where I go back to my quote, you can shear a sheep many times, you can skin him only once. There was a lot of people that just felt like we're about to be skinned, and we can't vote this way, even if we've been a lifelong person on this team.
That's right. You nailed it. And what I saw, and you know that I followed the polls very closely. I probably followed about 7 independent pollsters for a good 3 months out. And Aaron, we did a show about 3 episodes ago. Remember the show? It might have been called Inside the Latest Poll Numbers. And I think the subheadline was "The Numbers Aren't Adding Up." Do you remember this? We talked about this. So the numbers that I just showed, the 312 to 226, do you realize that every single one of these independent, bipartisan, non-Republican, non-Democrat pollsters, every single one of them had Trump winning the electoral vote at a minimum of 50, but most were at 100. I just showed 312 to 226. They nailed it. Every single one of them were scratching their heads going, none of this math is adding up. To your point, all of these little psyop, language manipulation type things, using these toxic terms that they used in Nazi Germany and then actually comparing the other candidate to Nazi Germany. At some point, you can only insult the intelligence of the American people long enough before they go, this is not American. This is not how you treat the other candidate. This is right out of the Nazi playbook. So they're actually ninja level gaslighters, because everything that they were accusing Trump of, they were doing in plain sight. To me, I firmly believe at this point, and I'm no Trump fan, I actually think we're better candidates. I preferred to see somebody like a Ron DeSantis rise up as the next generation of Republican leadership. I wanted RF Kennedy to be a Democrat and fix the party. By the way, I'm going to talk about this in a minute. RFK, if he was allowed to run as a Democrat, would have absolutely blown Joe Biden out of the water in a primary. By the way, they didn't allow the primary, and he would have crushed Donald Trump in the master election. I'll talk about that in a minute. They missed it. And I'm going to talk in a minute about how the Democrats actually got Trump elected. They did it. Every step of the way, they got their worst nightmare into office for another 4 years. But going back to what we were just saying about this terminology and the manipulation and the gaslighting, I mean, you almost need to be asleep to not say that this is really not how you run a campaign. You run a campaign based on what have you accomplished, number one, track record. What can you accomplish, number two, future pacing, what are my plans? So you really know that you have a bad candidate, a bad marketer, a bad leader, a bad CEO when they can only throw stones and gaslight and they don't say, here's what I've accomplished. I think track records are critical. And here's what I'm going to do moving forward. Here's my vision for improving your life. Those are the big two. Now, Trump did that. Trump had excellent advice, advisory, and the people that just decided to come onto the team along the way. J.D. Vance is absolutely brilliant. He's one of the nicest guys I think I've ever seen in politics. He's calm, he's calculated, he's respectful. That's the VP. Guys like Vivek Ramaswamy, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Bill Ackman, Elon Musk, all these people that came over. By the way, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, you know they're running this new government efficiency division. First of all, let me explain something for anybody who's having trouble keeping up with us right now. Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are legitimate, categorized geniuses. They check every box. They are self-made billionaires, and you don't get to be a self-made billionaire if you're not brilliant.
Is Vivek a billionaire?
Oh, yeah. He scored in the biotech industry, and he wrote the book Woke Inc. So he was warning the public 7 years ago about this wokeism industrial complex that was permeating corporate America in the school system. Great book. We'll put it in the show notes called Woke Inc. But Elon Musk's book is really good as well. And he just appeared on Joe Rogan right before the election. And he broke down a lot of what you just mentioned, Aaron, a lot of what I've been screaming from the rooftop on social media, which is these little pillars that they're putting in place, these little misdirections, these little gaslighting moves, these little persuasion techniques that they're using that really are evil words in a lot of cases that just drained the American people. And it drained them to the point where there was no one left to vote for them. The fact that Donald Trump won the popular vote is the greatest slap in the face to the Democrat Party, maybe in the history of its existence. At the end of the day, they thought they could have lost the electoral vote, because Republicans tend to do well in these battleground states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, right? Heartland of America, Sun Belt type states. So they were worried about those states. But you know what they always could hang on? No matter what, we're way more popular than Republicans. Even if we lose the election, we can hang our heads high. You know why? Because we won the popular vote. At the end of the day, our egos are still good because we're popular. They like us. You got smashed in the popular vote by 5 million votes by one of the most unpopular candidates in American history, and that is Donald Trump. He is a very unpopular, polarizing candidate, and he annihilated you in the popular vote, and he annihilated you in the electoral vote. In all of these counties and cities and states across America, they all said, we want conservative leadership. We just looked at 4 years of liberal leadership, and we've seen 4 years of conservative leadership under Trump. And you know what? We had secure borders. We had law and order. We had low inflation. We were energy independent, not energy dependent, buying oil from Venezuela. We were not in 3 wars. And there was not a censorship industrial complex that was shutting down any dissent or debate or anybody who wanted to rise up and speak against the establishment. They were done. I was done. You were done. You would have been done if you were here. Rogan was done. Musk was done. Kennedy was done. Right? Ackman was done. These are people who didn't need to put their businesses and their lives on hold to explain what I just explained publicly in rallies and doing 10 speeches a day.
Well, and I think what was unfortunate for the Democrat Party is that they played their hand too long with Biden.
They definitely did.
They definitely did. I mean, everybody knew, whether they want to admit they knew or not. Anybody watching knew.
They definitely did.
He unfortunately had some cognitive issues that continued to get worse and worse and worse.
Absolutely.
And they played that card too long. And then when they decided, okay, we need to shift here, and they said, who's a great candidate? I can see from a certain perspective why they would choose Harris.
Well, it's a logical next step because she's the VP.
Well, one, she's the VP. Two, she's a female, which there's a lot of people, including me, that are looking forward to seeing the day when there's a female president.
You're going to see it in probably 8 years, and I'll tell you who it's going to be in a minute.
All right. So she's got mixed race, African American, but I think she's mixed, right? So
she's half Indian, half Jamaican.
Okay, there you go. So she's gonna pull, in theory, that vote. The problem is when you actually take another step back and you look at the strategy, she was the person riding shotgun in a complete economic meltdown.
That's right.
And a warmongering evolution in those 4
yep.
years, and a poor, the poor track record with the health crisis.
And how about the border? She was the first person put in charge of it in 2021.
And when she was put on, when she was put on camera and asked what she was going to do to fix those issues, she really didn't have an answer. And I think that was very disconcerting for a lot of people.
It definitely was. It definitely was.
Even that seemed like the left-wing controlled media outlets, even their interviewers were struggling trying to get answers out of her of like, do you have a plan? And quite frankly, maybe she didn't have enough time to prep for a plan. Maybe if she'd had a year of people around her, she could have prepped a plan, but you just kind of threw her in the last second, which it kind of brings me to what you said earlier, because I was kind of surprised you said that, is that you believe RFK, if he'd been allowed to be on that ticket, would have crushed Trump. And I do want to point something out that I found really funny that he said is near the end, he said, I was trying to get on the ballot in every state, and I was being sued by the Democrats to keep me off the ballots. And then when I sided with Trump, they switched and they started suing me for trying to pull myself off the ballots because they wanted to divide the vote. Like, it was so crazy.
Absolutely. That's all fact, by the way, what you just said. I mentioned it in another episode. The lawfare, the election interference, and the censorship was astounding on another level. I want to come back to the RFK thing in a minute, because, by the way, at the time of this recording, he was just selected as the director for Human Health Services. I don't think it's the exact name. Human Health and Wellness Services, I'm not sure, but that's a big health division. But I want to just finish off with this concept of the manipulation in the wordsmithing that really, at the end of the day, I think drove a stake in the hearts of the Democrats because they took it too far. There's two things that bother me the most.
They made the American populace angry.
They made the American people angry, and there's three ways that they did it. I'm going to talk about all three, and then feel free to jump in. Number one, I want to talk about the border thing because we just talked about that. Now, they like to say, and they said this all along, we have always been about solutions. I mean, I'm speaking from Harris's mouth right now. From day one, we have been about solutions. Let me tell you what happened on day one. In January of 2021, that's day one, that was month one in office, they undid over a dozen border security laws that were Trump-era border security laws, Aaron. They undid them. They passed executive orders. If there's a law in place by a previous president that you want to remove when you're the president, once you're sworn in, you can pass an executive order to just remove it because now you're the new president. Over a dozen laws were removed. They instituted a catch and release policy that basically said to the world, if you come in and we catch you, if you come in through a non-asylum entry point, which means you're coming in illegally, let's be clear, and we catch you, this new policy says we have to release you into society. They did this for 3 straight years, as they said they were part of the solution. Then they got caught flying migrants, illegal migrants, into different aspects of America on airplanes overnight at 3 a.m, and they were putting them into swing states. Elon Musk, in his interview with Joe Rogan, broke it all down. He has the data. He pulled the data meticulously with his team from the Department of Homeland Security's website, showing on record hundreds of thousands of migrants flown from their countries into America in the dead of night and dropped off with debit cards loaded up with $1,000 and set up in society in swing states. Think about what I just said. That is the largest human trafficking ring in American history conducted by a U.S. administration, as she's saying we were part of the problem. Here's number 2. They passed a border law in 2024. Where was a border bill, I should say, or they tried to pass one. Aaron, where was the border bill in 2021, 2022? 2023. We were at 7 million illegal crossings by 2023. Where was the bill then? Oh, it was an election year. Sorry, my bad. I just answered my own question. Do you know what that border bill had in it? I have the bill right here. I'm looking at the bill as I'm doing this podcast because I know like people like to play this game right here that they failed to do 2 minutes of research. Guess what the border bill had in it? The border bill presented to Congress had $60 billion earmarked for, wait for it, Ukraine. A United States border bill. It gets better. The bill also allowed for 5,000 to 7,500 illegal migrants to come into the country per week, still in the bill. So please tell me how you're passing a border bill that sends more money to Ukraine, less money. Only 20 billion of that money was earmarked for the border, by the way. It was something like a $90 billion border bill. 14 million was going to Israel, 60 billion going to Ukraine. And oh, by the way, thank you for leaving 20 billion behind for America, even though it's an American border bill. And oh, by the way, thanks for still allowing 5,000 to 7,500 million illegal migrants per week to come into the country. And then if it exceeds that amount, we'll actually close the border. This is their solution that came in 2024. So when they say it was the Republicans who stopped the border bill and they're the reason for the problem, that was the height of gaslighting, manipulation, and bait and switch. I've never seen anything like it. And I have the border bill here. You know that I'm a guy that doesn't just say things without making sure I have the information. I might not be right all the time, but I'm going to lean on being right about 99% of the time. I'm staring at the bill right now. The border bill earmarked $60 billion for Ukraine, and it allowed 5,000 to 7,500 illegal migrants to still come into the country per week. As they said, they're part of the solution. Donald Duck would have laughed at that bill. You know what they did after that, Aaron? They said Donald Trump is the guy who killed the bill, and he's trying to do it because he wants to run on it. So let's unpack what they just did. You want to talk about manipulation? They created a fake bill that they knew nobody would approve. And when it didn't get approved, guess what they did? They blamed their opponent. It's his fault. But nobody took the time to read the bill.
I don't think many people do.
But that's the thing. So I made sure for this episode I have the bill. Second thing I want to talk about is this Project 2025. You familiar with this?
No.
So they used another lie and abusive language in this Project 25 document. So there's a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation. Just like there's liberal think tanks. And when a new president is about to come in, when a new administration ideally is about to come in, if it's your guy or your gal, there's always these mandates for leadership. There's these documents they put together where they say, hey, we'd like to make a proposal to you, Donald Trump, or you, Kamala Harris, on how we think leadership should be under a conservative Republican or under a liberal Democrat leadership. So large document, staring at it right now. It's on my desktop. I'm not going to bring it up because it's 900 pages, and I haven't read all 900 pages, but I've scanned most of it. And there's a website that this organization has put up. They said that in Project 2025, that A, it was Donald Trump's secret doc. He has nothing to do with it. Check that. Number two, you know what else they said, Aaron? They said Project 2025 says that if Donald Trump's president, he'll ban abortion across the nation for good. Yeah, I have the document in front of me, and it isn't even mentioned.
It's quite interesting because that seemed to be
the most divisive of them all, right?
Yeah, that seemed to be the one thing that the people who were voting Democrat, when they were being interviewed at these different polling stations, they were saying, I'm voting for my daughter's rights. I'm voting for my daughter's rights. And it made me look stuff up because I was thinking, well,
what rights are being impeded on?
Yeah, what rights are being impeded here? And it turns out and you can tell me if I'm wrong because you know more about this than I do. It turns out that I believe what Trump said is, no, I'm not going to put any new laws or repeal any laws.
Nothing.
I'm just going to allow the states, which is the way that it's been for a very long time, to just define what their state laws are, not a federal law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. So number one, Trump is a moderate on abortion, probably the most moderate of any Republican in a long time. Meaning,
that's what I thought too.
Meaning he doesn't care if you want to get an abortion, but he wanted to put a 15-week ban in, which at the end of the day, Aaron, if anybody's fighting for an abortion past 15 weeks, they probably should be in a psychiatric institute. I mean, let's be real. 15 weeks.
There are outlier situations for sure.
If the woman's life is at risk, absolutely, right? 100%.
Life is at risk. Woman's life is at risk.
You and I are pro-choice guys. We get it, but let's be real. This isn't going to happen at 6 months. So he never said it, and he never ran on it. And I'm also looking right now at the website. So each candidate has a website where their policies are on the website. There's no policy on the Trump-Vance administration website that says in any way, shape, or form that they're going to go after abortions in any way at all. In fact, they're the ones that undid Roe versus Wade in their administration. that just moved abortion from being a federal level to a state level where it's just, he said, I'm staying out of it. It's just at the state level. I'm not involved. He wasn't running on that. They don't have time for this crap, right? Secondly, they said that Project 2025 was going to ban Social Security. I have the Project 2025 doc in front of me as we speak, and I'm going to link to the website below where they demystified every single one of these claims. I'm only going to talk about two here today. Never once mentioned that Social Security would be in any way affected for any retiree. So they said that they were going to ban abortion, and they said that they were going to ban Social Security, and they ran on that. And Kamala Harris on almost every opening speech said, exact words, if Donald Trump wins, he will ban abortion nationwide. This was her opening statement. She was riling up that fear. It was a blatant lie. And it only took about a minute or two of research to go, you know what? Let me take a look at this controversial Project 2025 doc and just double check. But we're going to put the website down below, which Project 2025, that Heritage Foundation, they took every one of those lies and they said, we're going to tell you what's true and what's not true. And they took every one of them, beautiful website, and they said, here's our stance. This is our words in writing, dated and timestamped. Here's what they ran on, and here is the truth. All of it was a lie. The third thing I want to talk about is this women's rights things, to your point. I saw LeBron James post on his Instagram, Aaron, last week. He has a young daughter. I think she's 3 or 4 years old, but he has older sons as well. I'm going to fight every which way that I can to protect my baby girl. We don't need the help of this new administration coming in. We won't let them attack your rights. Okay. Secondly, was the mayor or the senator of Chicago, exact words. You want to talk about crazy? Exact words. If you come for my people in my state, I'm coming for you. Coming for you how? How would the Trump administration be coming for you? If you come for my women in my state, I'm coming for you. How would anybody be coming for women in your state? So now I've done this exercise with people. You and I both know that women crawl over broken glass to get to America to be able to have equal rights. We know this, right? They crawl over broken glass. Literally. I know that's not legitimate, but it's a figurative term. They crawl over broken glass to get here. I have, again, looked at all the information. I have a mom, a sister, a daughter, and a wife. Okay? There is not one policy on any of the websites. There's not one speech in which the new Trump administration or J.D. Vance has said that they will threaten or impede upon women's rights in any way, shape, or form. Literally does not exist. So when I ask these people who are trying to play the game of, this guy's horrible, I'm no longer going to talk to you if you vote for him because he's against women's rights and all this, you do realize that everything you're saying is false. It doesn't exist. So Social Security being banned does not exist. Banning abortion does not exist. And there's not one policy or even a hint of a policy that states that this administration is going to threaten or impede upon women's rights in any way, shape, or form. This is disgusting.
Well, and that's where, when I took 2 minutes because that was something that was being repeated heavily in the last 3 weeks. Those are two very.
This was the Hail Mary, Aaron.
Right. And those are two very contentious subjects. So I wanted to read about and understand how those rights could be impeded. I have a daughter. She's 20. I'm pro-choice. But I also want to have a limit on times because I think that's logical. I think once there's a certain amount of time that gets pretty dicey.
Of course.
You know, that just seems logical. My daughter's gay, so she's, you know, I'm definitely looking at, you know, her perception of how her rights could be impeded as LGBTQ or as a female. And I couldn't find anything.
Can't find it, man.
And so if you keep spreading lies, if you do it at a level that's high enough, eventually even the dumbest person is going to find out that you're lying. And then if you add in not having a plan for anything, and then you add in you're spending half your money where you shouldn't be spending it, instead of spending on marketing, you're spending it on things that don't really have any relation to
paying off people to endorse you.
Right. And then you look at, what did the 4 years look like before? Well, we didn't have an open border. Now we do. We didn't have wars. Now we do. We didn't have inflation. Now we do. We didn't have the level of censorship in the media and in social media and everything. And now we do. We didn't have people voting without IDs. Now we do. When you combine all of these things together, eventually even the staunchest supporter goes, I had enough.
Aaron, and by the way, we're not suggesting here that Trump probably didn't inflate the truth or do some lying along the way.
Sure.
This is politics.
Trump gets fact checked all the time.
Yeah, of course. But it's funny how he's the only one that gets fact checked, so it's not a fair and balanced playing field. But if I put them down, a white piece of paper, and we said, this candidate and that candidate left and right, and we just made a list of the lies on both sides, without any real work, Kamala Harris's lying was like 3x Trump's lying. I have it all here.
It's not about Harris and Trump. It's about the institution. It's about the party. It's about the media. People could see that there was this massive power shifting, and it was pushing people towards a cliff.
It was.
And they were like, we can't do this.
You know what Elon Musk said in his interview with Rogan, Aaron? He said, this is the last election if Trump doesn't get elected. And again, I know I have to unpack this for the Trump derangement syndrome audience. It's about 30% of the population. No, he doesn't love Trump. No, they're not best buddies. Yes, he would have liked to seen a more stable candidate. Trump was the guy's name on the ticket. If it was Nikki Haley, he would have said the same thing. Ron DeSantis, he would have said the same thing. That the Republican Party at this time had to win, because if 4 more years of that Marxist movement took place, there might not be much left of America. That isn't rocket science at this point, but I have to continue to unpack that and draw pictures for the Trump derangement syndrome. True. He firmly believed it could have been the last election. He put his life on the line, his business on the line, his reputation on the line, deals on the line, lost a shit ton of advertisers, by the way. I mean, Twitter X right now is bleeding cash, and it could have been profitable if he didn't take a stance against the Democrat Party. He made that decision because he watched the whole entire American empire slipping away. Robert F. Kennedy has lost family members and friends, and he's never invited back in the Democrat Party again. I don't think he cares anymore. There isn't even a Democrat Party anymore. But he's not invited back. What's that saying, Aaron? Where you get in the boat and you cut the rope, you cut the ties. There's a phrase, right?
You burn the boats.
You burn the boats. I mean, these guys burned the boats. They didn't have to do this. They didn't get paid to do this. I always look at, where's the money? Did they get paid to do this, or did they not get paid to do this? And everybody on the other side is somehow involved in some industrial complex conflicts of interest payoff. Now I'm hearing stars are getting paid. People are owed $1 million for their 4-minute speech at a rally. It's like complete chaos. But here's the funny thing. Didn't you run on the fact that you were going to increase or help the economy, and you were going to create a new opportunity economy? You just raised $1 billion, and you're $200 million in the hole, and you are going to create better economics in an opportunity economy. You couldn't even figure out the economy or the math on your own campaign. It is a complete embarrassment, a complete and utter embarrassment. And I want to pivot here, Aaron, unless you want to jump in on that, this language manipulation thing.
That doesn't really require a whole lot of breaking down and explanation.
It really does, and it's incredible. But I want to talk about, I want to leave with this, because here's what a lot of people don't see. The Democrat Party got Donald Trump elected. The Republican Party, I thought, did a masterful job with organization and unity and bringing in big names and coming together. And they had some great people, great teams. They were able to get ahead of the attempt to cheat. What they weren't expecting in 2020 is the mail-in ballot shenanigans and maybe some illegal voting. They were completely flat-footed. In 2024, you had people on notice. You had people all over the country on notice, and they were waiting for this illegal migrant loophole thing. And by the way, if anybody thinks that's a rumor, the Democrats in July voted against a bill called the SAVE Act, which would require U.S. citizenship to vote along with ID. They voted for it unanimously in the House. That's black and white. So they're not hiding it. They voted against a bill before the election that would allow illegals to vote. So let's be clear that their actions speak louder than their words. And they got caught in a couple states. There was a lawsuit filed in Virginia. Virginia found something like 90,000 votes. And by the way, Virginia was following the law that a Democrat put into law in the 90s. Democrat called Tim Kaine, I think he was a senator, put an election integrity law in place that doesn't allow non-citizens to vote. So they followed the law in Virginia, and then they got sued for following the law because they got caught cheating or trying to cheat. But the landslide was too big. But I want to get to this part right here, because this all started back in 2022 when RFK said, hey, listen, I'm running for president as a Democrat. I think I'm the best chance you've got. I can take down Joe Biden and I can rebuild this party. This party has slipped into a totalitarianism, Marxist censorship, warmongering cult. I can come in here and fix this. He was shunned. He was censored. He was marginalized. He was put down. And then they changed the rules. The DNC changed the rules of the primaries. This was around the primary time where if there was any time that you were going to step up and run against Joe Biden, normally people don't run against an incumbent, right? When you have another term, usually it's status quo where you say it's his, unless he doesn't want it anymore. Joe Biden is selfish. Joe Biden should have stepped out at 81 years old at that point in time, and he should have either endorsed Kamala then, or he should have let RFK compete against Kamala, which would have been over in 10 minutes. So RFK was the guy, okay? But they couldn't handle his intelligence. They couldn't handle the fact that he knew what they were up to, so they marginalized him, pushed him out. You know what they did, Aaron, early on? Here's step one of how they got Trump elected. Number one is they changed the rules of the primary in the most important early state, which is New Hampshire, and I think North or South Carolina, where they said that if he gets on the ballot in one of those states, then he's immediately disqualified. They changed the law. They actually put a loophole in the DNC primary law that actually made it where RFK couldn't compete in the primary and had to drop out. So they changed the law. They violated the Constitution in the early primaries, and they made it where RFK had to leave. What did he do when he left? He went to step two. I'm now leaving the Democrat Party, and I'm running as an independent. Now he was running against Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and he was doing very well, as we know. Okay? So let's go to step two. Step two is now he's running as an independent, and now the same DNC, Democrat machine, is actually trying to file lawsuits in certain states to remove him from the ballot. God only knows why. They actually did remove him from the debate stage that he qualified for back in July of 2024, where he would have debated against Donald Trump and Joe Biden in a three-way race. By the way, Ross Perot, Bill Clinton, and I forget who the third person was. All three of them stood on stage in the 90s, and they debated, and Ross Perot's numbers were lower than RFK's numbers. So they rigged RFK off the stage, fact. So now he said, okay, if you're not going to let me compete in a debate, you already didn't let me be in the primary. Now I'm an independent, so now I'm competing against both of you. Now I'm going to run it. Now I'm dropping out. Actually, there's one more. And then in the state of New York, they sued to keep him off the ballot in the state of New York, so that was over. It cost them $10 million to fight it, Aaron. I think I told you this.
Yep.
They actually sued, and you want to know why they sued to keep him off the ballot in New York?
He wasn't a resident.
He lives in California right now, but yet he's a New York resident. His legal law license is in New York. His hunting license is in New York, and his falconry license is in New York. His house is in New York. His family's in New York, but he just so happens to live in California right now. So they said that means you disqualify as calling yourself a New York resident. You've essentially misled the voting board because you're a California resident. Completely false. He fought it and won, but it was $10 million. And at this point, he's like, they're going to drain me. Now he drops out and endorses Trump a month later. So now he's on his third opportunity here. And he says to Trump, listen, I'm going to get Trump elected. I think it's maybe spite at this point. I'm going to get Trump elected, and I'm going to have a role in that administration, and I'm going to live my passion. I'm going to live my dream of fixing the chronic disease crisis and ending censorship in America and getting us out of these forever wars. That was a great message. That was his message he ran on as an independent. That was his message that he was winning very well on as an independent. He had 20% of the approval of the people at one point. He had a 50% approval rating and actually 20%, up as high as 20% in the election, which means if you take 20% of 300 million people, if he stays in that race, he gets something like 50 or 60 million votes, Aaron. That's a real contender at the independent level. But now he lands in the Trump administration, and guess what? Now you have the RFK factor. He's now telling his 60 million followers, vote for Trump. Now Elon Musk is saying, RFK's here, vote for Trump. So guess what just happened? The lawfare, the election interference, the changing of the rules, and not to mention something like 91 counts against Donald Trump, but only after he said he was running from 2022 to 2024, brought him in and out of court. We both know that some of those charges are probably legit, but let's be real, most of them are probably bogus. In fact, they changed the law in New York, and the falsifying business records case is actually a civil charge, not a federal charge, but they actually changed the law and made it federal when it's civil. This is Soviet Union style shit, Aaron. Changing the law, changing the rules of the primary interfering with the election, removing people from the ballot, and even late in the game, keeping him on the ballot in Wisconsin and Michigan so that he might actually hurt Trump and help Harris. And here he is on Trump's side, something he didn't want to do, but it was his last chance to be involved in the game, to be able to fulfill his mission, which was removing censorship, which was chronic disease crisis, and which was ending the forever wars. They drove Trump into office because of what they did to RFK. And at the end of the day, if they let him do what a democracy would allow a candidate to do, I firmly believe that RFK would have been the candidate in the Democrat Party in 2022, and he would have crushed Trump in a general election. So they got everything they didn't want. This is, I guess, karma. What goes around comes around. What they did to one man, they drove their worst nightmare into office.
I think that was a big part of it. I think the other things that we've talked about also were big parts of it. I think people became aware, had enough, didn't like the direction it was going. Didn't
that
like
too,
the
for
last
sure.
4 years.
That too, for sure.
But I think had Kennedy been the nominee, he would have had a plan and he would have addressed those things. And I think you're right. I think they would have at least had a much stronger chance to win. I don't know if I agree with you that they would have beat him.
Then who would have beat him?
That Kennedy would have beat Trump.
You don't think so?
I don't know.
I actually think again, I'm guessing. It's a prediction. I think you would have won.
But I know it certainly would have been very close.
You want to know why I know he would have won? Because I'm the most qualified guy here to take these stances for a couple reasons. Number one, I didn't vote in the 2020 election, so I didn't vote for Trump or Biden. Number two, I wanted Ron DeSantis to be the Republican candidate. Number three, as soon as RFK said he was running, because I've been a donor to his Children's Health Defense Organization for 5 years, and I've read all his books, and I really love the guy as an American environmentalist, he's a true patriot. I was now voting for him as a Democrat, and then I was voting for him as an independent, and the only reason I voted for Trump is I had one mission when I went to the ballot box on Tuesday. I'm voting for RFK's presence. Simple as that. And I'm one of about 20 million people that probably felt the same way on that day.
True.
So when you think about it that way, this is a guy that has the ability to make a major league difference. And I do think he could have won.
Yeah, I'm not saying he couldn't have. I don't know if.
But you know what I think the most important part about that is, Aaron? I actually think he would have fixed the party, which means if we had a healthy Democrat Party and a healthy Republican Party, by the way, the Republican Party right now in America has never been healthier, more stable, and more united, and they've brought over a slew of Democrats. That party is about to go on I'm going to get to your woman president thing here, buddy. I didn't forget about you. That party is about to go on a 4 years Trump. J.D. Vance has got 8. Who the heck knows if RFK's in the mix? You might be looking at a decade or decade and a half conservative run here that's well-deserved for all the reasons we mentioned here on the show. But I'm going to tell you right now that the first woman president of the United States, I've predicted it for many years now. Thank God it wasn't Kamala Harris. She was such a fraud, and she's such a fraud. She'll never see a day in office or in politics ever again. Will be Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard, she's the most elegant, most qualified, most respectful person in politics, in my view. Her and RFK are my two favorite people. Not just politicians.
You've said that to me for
many times.
Years.
My dream ticket was actually Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard, as independents, but at that time, she just didn't want to do it. I don't think she felt that the independent movement had any legs, so she was, I think, kind of holding out, and then she became a Republican, by the way, last week. I don't know if you know that.
She's like me. I said to you on many of our shows.
Too soon?
I love
Too soon?
RFK, and he's not going to win because the American public can't handle it.
I think we said together they might not be ready for it just yet, right? And listen, Trump, RFK has amazing foresight. He saw that and left and said, "Listen, I'm gonna cancel my campaign, and I'm gonna go get on the conservative ticket." By the way, for reference, RFK also reached out to the Harris team.
That's what I was
and
gonna
said,
say. Didn't he reach out and said, "Do you want me to step in?"
I'm going to step aside, but I'm only going to align myself with somebody who's going to let me do 3 things: solve the chronic disease crisis, get us out of these forever wars, and stop censorship for good. They never even returned the phone call. You know what Trump did? He said, "I'd love to hear your ideas." Guy by the name of Callie Means. I don't know if you know Callie Means. Callie Means is a big name right now. We'll link to a podcast down below where he was on with Joe Rogan. He used to work for Coca-Cola. He's in business with his sister. She used to be a doctor in the pharmaceutical industry, and they've just exposed the entire cabal, and they're going around telling their stories. And they actually connected RFK with Trump and said, you guys have got to align right now or we could lose the American experiment. And they did. And that was right after the Butler assassination. So very fascinating little situation there with the whole RFK Trump thing. But yeah, man, it really was dicey. And I don't think people quite yet understand what another 4 years of Build Back Better would have looked like after the last 4 years of Build Back Better. Take the Trump personality out of it, like we said in the beginning. Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, it would have been a bigger victory.
We need to wrap it up. What would be your final words on this?
Final words on this, takeaway wise would be you've got to now be hyper conscious to language. You've got to be hyper conscious to not just taking something at face value that is being delivered by mainstream media. Mainstream media just hit an all-time low, world history, on trust. I think it's something like 20 to 30%. It's never been below 50.
We've been talking about the trust recession.
So you've now got to basically look at platforms like Twitter, uncensored, Substack, uncensored, Rumble, uncensored. And you've got to say, okay, if mainstream media, and we'll do a different episode, they're now going to call Robert F. Kennedy a dangerous anti-vaxxer who's going to head up human health services.
That's the next wave.
When meanwhile, he's never been anti-anything, but that's their game because
he's pro-science.
He's dangerous to the pharmaceutical industrial complex. He's the guy that said, listen, if you're going to make a vaccine in this country, you've got to be able to do two things. You've got to show me double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, major league safety, major league gold standard of science. And you know what else you have to do? You're not getting immunity. If you fuck up, you're getting sued. They're the only medicine manufacturers in the world that have immunity. He wants to do two things: remove their immunity shield, okay, and have better science in which they have to prove efficacy, not dictate efficacy. They're going to be all out of business, buddy. And you know what? The world's going to be fine because the majority of these vaccines are so goddamn old school, outdated. They don't do crap. In fact, they're causing more harm than good. I'm not saying all of them, but every single one needs to be audited and analyzed, and that's all he's ever said. Give me an audit, give me an analysis, give me your best gold standard science, and you'll have approval all day long. But here's the difference. You won't be forced to take it. You'll have a choice to take it because you'll have all the right information. That's called freedom. That's called sovereignty. And that's all he's after. So when you hear people attacking him for what he's bringing to the table under the Trump administration, just know these are the greatest frauds that have ever walked the planet, and they're trying to protect two things: the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the military industrial complex. And they're all paid. They're all paid. Everybody who says that are paid. Show me somebody who is putting down a guy who wants to improve our health, and I'll show you someone who's paid by the medical industry every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I'll leave you with, you've got to really watch the labels. This is the biggie. Whatever label you see getting assigned, I would say at this point with 99% accuracy, it's probably the opposite. So if I called Aaron Parkinson right now an anti-weight training guy, reminds me of the X3 guy. He wrote the book "Weightlifting is a Waste of Time," right? And he proved it. He proved why variable resistance bands is better than weight training. So if I label you as anti-weights, then you've got to prove to me why you're not anti-weights. You don't get to label me and call me a loser or an anti-waiter or a dangerous misinformation guy. Just prove it. I made a statement. Prove it. This is how it works in court systems, right? This is how it works in the law. And somehow we got away from that. We've gone to label, censorship, and marginalization. And I would tell the viewers that you want to watch language and you want to watch labels really closely, because that's going to get you as close as anything to the truth. As I like to say, the labels will set you free. Oh, misinformation probably means the truth. Oh, anti-vax probably means anti-science. Tough world we're in right now. And I think it's going to be the same in these next 4 years, because they're going to try to take down Trump every chance they get. Remember who we're dealing with right here in closing. We are dealing with a constituency, again, I estimate about 30% of the population, that would rather see the American experiment fail than Trump to succeed. Their love for America, their hatred for Trump is bigger than their love for America. That is a dangerous, dangerous person that A, you can't trust, and B, you need to be very aware of.
I would agree.
Let's wrap it there, buddy. I think this was a good one. We'll dive into a business related topic, but again, I think the goal coming in was a lot of things that happened that you probably didn't know happened that we took the time to dissect. And secondly, what does it mean for you as a business person, entrepreneur, promotion? The mistakes that you can make that you shouldn't make, being very careful with language, being very careful with positioning, and not abusing the language you use when you market, right? Persuasion can be used for good or bad. We gave a couple examples of how it was used toxically, and the public spoke, and a red wave took place and wiped out that toxic language and that manipulative communication that permeated that campaign, especially in the final 3 weeks. So good stuff, buddy. Thanks for your contribution as an outsider. It's always good to, have you come in and maybe be a non-American objective view coming in, as we here in the U.S. can get emotional about either side that we're on at any given time. So I thought we unpacked a lot. There's a couple resources we'll put in the show notes down below. Great one here, buddy. I'm Andrew. That's Aaron. We'll see you next time.